Let's talk about functions and variables. In the last class, if you've been following, I explained how to use VS Code. You can see the link in the description. So in this class, we are going to be taking a look at functions and variables. All right, so the first thing I would want to do is let me just create this file. Let me call it hello.py. And like I explained in the first class, every file has its own extension. So py tells the computer that this is a Python file. MP3 signifies an audio file, MP4 video file, JPEG, PNG, images, and so on and so forth. All right, so now the first thing I would want to do over here is to write a simple code, and that this is the most basic hello world. All right, so let me save this, and then so we have written our first line of code. We said print hello world. Now this is where you write your code, and then this terminal here is where you can execute or run the code. And to run the code now, I'm going to write Python 3. I'm on MacBook. If you're on Windows, you can use just Python. So Python 3, and then what is the name of the file that I want to run? And then I can now say hello world. I wrote Python 3 space hello.py. I pressed enter, and then it gave me this hello world. Now what you can observe is that the print here did not reflect inside the terminal. I only got hello world, and that is because print is a function. Print is a function. As we proceed in this course, we are going to be seeing several other functions and even how to write your own functions yourself. So print just displays it displays anything you write inside the parentheses. So this yellow bracket, we call them parentheses. So those yellow brackets, we call it parentheses. So anything I write inside this print function, it's what it displays it inside the what? Inside the terminal. And then I can also say, I can just give a name. I can say, let's say hello Hassan. Let me save this. I'm saving this with Control S if you're on Windows, or Command S if you're on MacBook. So if I run this again, Python 3 hello.py, I can now say hello Hassan. So this is a very simple code. So line 1 is a code. Inside the terminal, I am executing or running that code. So when I run the code, now Python now works as an interpreter. So it is not going to interpret this code because the computer only understands 0 and 1. So Python now interprets this code, and then the computer here now displays it in the terminal. So print is a function. I'm going to be explaining all of these values, save end file in subsequent videos. So we say print hello Hassan. Now the next thing we may want to learn, now imagine I say something like print, and then I say something like Hassan. Okay, let me say something like Hassan was here, right? And then maybe I can also print something that says I was with Hassan yesterday. Now from what you can see here, you can see that I have repeated Hassan about 3 times. Hello Hassan. Hassan was here, and I was with Hassan yesterday. So let me save that first, and then let me also write again Python 3 hello.py. Now you can now see all 3 of them displayed here in the terminal. Hello Hassan. Hassan was here. I was with Hassan yesterday. Now there's something wrong with this code which may not be obvious to you at this time, and that is repetition. Now imagine I discover that, oh, the name of this person isn't Hassan, It is James. So now I will have to now do what? Change Hassan in 3 different places to what? To James. And then I will also come here and also change Hassan to James. All right. Okay, to James. So let me save this. Run this again. You now say, hello James. James was here. I was with James yesterday. So now this is now going to introduce us to the world of variables. Now, what is a variable? A variable is like a container that contains a piece of information. So it is going to contain a piece of information so that anytime you want to make reference to that information, you are going to refer to that variable. And now let me give you an example. Now we know James is the name of a person, so I can declare my variable here. I can call it name, and then equals to, I can now say something like let me say James here. And then instead of all this, I can just print, I will say something like, I can say hello, and then I will say something like name. All right. Name equals to James. And now I am saying hello and name. Now you can now see there's a difference here. Inside this, I wrap this hello inside this double quote. But name on its own is not inside a double quote. Why? Because that name is a variable. It is not literal. Hello, it is literal. So it is going to print that literal hello. But this name, it is not literal. It is a variable. So it refers to what? To James. So anytime I want to refer to James now, I'm going to say hello name. And then I can say print again, and then I can say something like how are you, and then I can say something like name. So I can say how are you name, and then let me save this. So let me run this here. You can now see hello James, how are you James. Now the funny thing here, anyway, okay, let me just take these spaces out. I will explain all this later. So let's run this again. So we have hello James, how are you James. Now if the name is no longer James, I only need to come and change the value of this variable, and now you are now going to see hello Hassan, how are you Hassan. So that is what we know as variable. A variable is something that stores a piece of what information. I can also do something like this. I can say something like word equals to, let's say, we were there yesterday, and then I just want to print that word. So I want to print what? I want to print that word. All right, so if I do this and I run this now, so we now say we were there yesterday. Even though I was asking in my code, I was saying print word, but now Python now is not printing word. It is making reference to what the information this word variable stores, which is what we were there yesterday. Now it is now different from me now writing something like this word. So if I do this, let me run this code. Now you can now see it printed what? Word, because it is inside double quotes, and then it is now what? Literal. So a word, any text character, whether it's A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, that is wrapped inside a double quote like this, we call them strings. They are literal strings, and they are going to be displayed. Now let me now show you something very interesting over here. So let me say name equals to, let's do something like James. All right, so let's say the name here should be James, and then let's print okay, let's say something like his name is, and then we want to say something like name. So we want to say his name, his name. Now if I run this one now, It tells us his name is James. Now, how was Python able to distinguish between the first name and the second name? Why is it not printing is James or his name is Name? And that is because Python sees that, oh, name here is a variable. It is not wrapped inside a what? A double quote compared to this name. And another thing we might do is, why don't we do something like this? I want to introduce you to something called f-string. So imagine we say his name is James, and then we want to say something like, okay, his name is James. Okay, now I want to add a full stop. I want to add a full stop after this. His name is James. I can't do something like this. I'm going to have an error because the full stop is going to be a literal string on its own. So I may do something like this. Maybe I can just do something like this, full stop or thereabout. So now this is not going to come out really as perfect. You can always correct this later, but we'll say his name is James. Or I can do something like but this is just an example anyway. Or I can do something like let's say print, and then let me say I saw, and then I have to say something like name, all right, and then I will now say something like yesterday. Now imagine, so I have to say I saw name yesterday, meaning this name now refers to this James. It is not in double quotes, but I saw and yesterday, they are literal what? They are literal strings. So if I run this as well, it is going to give me his name is James. I saw James yesterday. Now I want us to transition away from printing this into something called f-string or string formatting. So these days now, we really mostly don't run our print statements like this. So you use the f-string, and the f-string makes it easy for you to print both literal strings as well as variables together. So if I say, I can even add the age. I can say age, and I can say equals to, let me do something like let's say 20 for example, and then I can say I saw name yesterday, all right, and ask his age for his age, right? And then I'll now say he is, so let me do something like he is, and then I now also say age, and then let me say years old. So let me save this. I saw name, meaning I saw James yesterday and asked for his age. He is age, referring to this is age, and then years old. So let me clear this, and let's clear this one here, and then let's run this. Now you now see his name is James, right? That's for line 4. Line 5 now says I saw James yesterday and asked for his age. He is what? He is 20 years old. But I can print the same thing using f-string. We call this string formatting, and it's going to require fewer double quotes. So I can say print. So this is the syntax for f-string. F-string is pretty much easy. It can only look cryptic at first. So let's say print, and then I'm going to add f, all right, and then I'm adding this my double quote. So I can say I saw name yesterday and asked for his age. He is age years old. All right, so now let me run this. Now okay, fine. So line 5 just tells us I saw name yesterday and asked, okay, let's say, and asked for his age, right? So he is age years old. So let me run this. So now we say I saw name yesterday and asked for his age. He is age years old. And that is because even though we added f, the computer cannot automatically know which one is a string, which one is a what, which one is a variable. So I can now say I saw name yesterday. So I'm going to add, we call this one curly braces. So we call this one here curly braces. The first one This one, this yellow one here is called parenthesis. This purple one is called curly braces. All right, so I saw name yesterday to signify that this name is not literal. It refers to a variable and asks for its age. Now, I am not going to put this age inside curly braces, because if I do that, it is going to think this age refers to this variable. It will now print and ask for is 20, and then we now say is 8 years old. So the curly braces is not coming to here, all right, and asked for his age. So the curly braces will now be here. It is what? 8 years old, which is now going to refer to what? To the actual age. So if I now run this one, now you see both line 4 and line 5, they give us the same response, the same output. So when you run your program and then it gives you a result, so that is what? An output. So now when you look at line 4 and line 5, which one do you think is easier? On line 4, I used 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I used 6 double quotes, while on line 5 I used just 2 double quotes, and for every variable I wrapped them inside what? Inside curly braces. So I'm going to be deleting line 5. All right, so let's save this now and run this. All right, so I saw James yesterday and asked for his age. He is 20 years old. Now, the next thing we are going to be taking a look at is another function called impute. Now, I told you print is a function, and the function just does a particular task that has been assigned to it, which we are going to explore later in this course. Now, when you go to a website or an application, now you are most likely going to, of course, impute your name and your age. They just don't assume your name is James. The application or the software does not assume your age is 20. It wants it's like you are using the ATM. So it's asking for your PIN. So application, software, website asks for your data. So they just don't assume your data. So what we have done here is like we have hard-coded the data. We have said the person's name is James and then his age is 20. Now the second function we are going to be looking at is called impute. So impute has by design been set to take input to accept data from the user. So instead of saying name equals to James, we can now use this function called impute. Now, functions like impute and print, so they are built-in Python functions. They came with Python. The developers of Python put in these functions for us to use. And then I can now use impute. Now, impute itself also takes this parenthesis. So when you're using functions, you are definitely going to be writing some of those values inside this parenthesis, which I'm going to explain the difference between arguments and parameters later. And now, so what do we really want to impute? Now, impute now, we can now ask that what is your name, all right? And then we can also ask here and say impute, and then we can also ask the user, how old are you? We are asking that what is your name, and then we are also asking how old are you? Now, anything can be inside impute. Anything can also be passed inside inside the impute. Now, impute is a function. So now functions takes arguments, and then we are going to be explaining that one later. But for now, this what is your name and how old are you? They are just mere placeholders for the user to see. Because imagine you go to a website and then you just see empty fields. How would you know where to put your first name, your last name, your date of birth, your email, all those and all that? So now, this what is your name, it is just descriptive. We want the user to have an idea of the kind of data that we want them to input. And another important thing is that when it comes to naming conventions for variables, it is always better to use, I can just come here and say X. I can come here and say Y. But someone who does not really know how to program may start wondering, what is X, what is Y? But by the time I do something like this, age and name, any person can imagine that, oh, I think this developer, this programmer is trying to get a name and use under what? The age. So whatever value the user now inputs will now become the value of this name and age as well. So let's do this. Now let us run our code again. So Python 3 hello.py, enter. Now what is your name? Well, the name now is Ade and then the age is 16. Now I saw Ade yesterday and asked for his age. He is 16 years old. We can run this code again and then let's say the person's name, let's say it is Ola, for example. How old are you, Ola? Well, Ola is 50 years old. Now I saw Ola yesterday and asked for his age. He is what? He is 50 years old. So this one is an example of what? Of another function, input. So the input function helps you to collect data from the what? From the user. So when the user now inputs Ola, so name now becomes what? Name now becomes Ola. If the user inputs 20 and then the age also becomes what? Becomes 20. So that means we are not hard coding anything. We are only using the value that's what? That the user has provided for us, or whoever is interacting with what? With the program. All right. So now that is good for now. So now the next thing we are now going to do is why don't we go into something like the string methods. So let's go into string methods. And now what are string methods? So string methods allow us to like dictate how strings will behave. So let me just quickly put this one away, and then why don't you just stick to name, and then let me just print what? Let me just print the name. All right. So now let me come over here and run this. Let's say, okay, let's say James. All right, so we have James. But now one thing here is, now imagine that I ask for someone's name and then the person's right James, which is J, lowercase j, and then AMES. But a name is a noun, and then we know that, oh, it must start with what? With an uppercase. Nouns, names start with uppercase, of course, especially in the English language. So now you may ask a user for their name, because you are not the one who is providing that data. So you are now left at the mercy of the user, of anyone interacting with the program. But there are some things you can do, and this is where we now have what we call string methods. So these ones interact with your strings and then they dictate the behavior. So now the first one we are going to be looking at is .title. Now title case in English language is that the first letter of every word is in uppercase. So and then let's do something like .title over here. .title. So I am saying when the user input their name, firstly it should convert it into what? A title case, and then it should now associate that value of that input to what? To name. So now let me save this now. Now let's run this code. So let's now say the user now says their name is let's say SEGUN, let's say Shegun. Enter. We can now say that S has now become what? Has now become capitalized. So let's also say this one now should be James. Okay, let's say James lowercase, and then let's say Adiola lowercase. You can now see that the J in James and the A in Adiola, they are now in what? In uppercase. So this is a good example of title case. For the first alphabet of every word in your string, it is going to convert it into what? Into a title case. And then we don't have just that alone. We have lower, and then lower converts everything into lowercase. So if I do let's say Smith, and then let's say Bashir. Okay, let's put this one as Bashir, and then for the Smith, let's even have the T. Okay, Bashir, let's even have this TH, or let's have this TH here. Okay, Bashir. So let's have this hold on. Okay, let's do this. Okay, Smith Bashir. So now let's do this. Let's say Smith, and then let's say Bashir. Now this converts everything into lowercase regardless of whatever form this is. Let's say SM, and then uppercase ITH, and then Bashir. Everything becomes what? It becomes lowercase. And also we have dot upper. So dot upper converts everything into what? Into uppercase. We have dot capitalize. So dot capitalize is a bit different from title. Why title case is going to convert the first letter of every word into an uppercase. So capitalize will only capitalize the first alphabet of the first word. So now let's change this one to, let's say something like let's say text. So now I am changing name to text because I want the data I want to provide to correspond with I want the variable to correspond with the variable, with the data that I want to provide. So I can just do something like this, say something, all right, and then let me come here to, and let me print what? The text. So now if I come over here and then I say once upon a time dot dot dot, you can now see that O is the only one that became what? Capitalized, and then the other ones are what? Are left as lower cases. But if I do something like the title, and then I save this, let me come over here. Now you will see, let me say once upon a time, and then you can now see that O is uppercase, U is uppercase, A is uppercase, and T as well is what? Is uppercase. All right, so that one is for a string method. Now we are also going to take a look at another, and that one here is replace. So we have something called dot replace. All right, now replace on its own, it's a method, all right, but then it now takes two arguments. Now I told you functions can take arguments, right? So now replace here takes arguments. Now the first argument is what do I want to replace? The second argument is what do you want to replace it with? Why? Because functions sometimes they don't really even always come complete, which I'm going to explain later. So you may want some additional information, additional feature in what? In a function, and this is where replace now comes in. So now the first argument is what do I want to replace? Well, I want to replace, let's say I want to replace Bashir. I want to replace it with James. All right, so anytime the program says Bashir, it should replace it with what? With James. So it takes, so the replace function takes, it can take up to 3 arguments. So the third argument is optional, which I'm going to show you. It takes an integer, which is a number. It tells you how many times should it be replaced. So if I do this and I now write let's say, okay, so let's do this okay, say something, I saw Bashir, all right, last night, enter. You can now see I saw James last night. I saw Bashir last night. You can now see I saw James last night. So now if I now do something like this, Bashir 1, Bashir again, hold on, Bashir, 3 times. Now it now turns into what? James, James, James. But if I pass the third argument inside this replace method, I just say 1. So the third argument takes a number. I'm going to explain functions and arguments in another video, in the next video after this one. If I save this and then I now run this code now, I now say Bashir Bashir, Bashir, Bashir. It is only going to replace Bashir once. If I don't pass the third argument, it is going to replace everything. But if I pass in the third argument and I give it the number of times I want it to replace, it does that either one. Give the number of count. All right. Now why don't we do something like this? Now that everything works, but let me do something now. Let me now say Bashir, Bashir. Let me do Bashir, and then let me do Bashir. All right. Now you see Bashir, James, Bashir. But why is he not changing this capital letter B Bashir into what's it called? Okay, the two Bashir in lowercase, the first and the last one. So why is he not changing them into James? Why? Let me show you another example. Let me write Bashir. Look at this Bashir, remains as Bashir, but this Bashir remains what? Remains James. You can pause the video and guess what's happening. All right. So what's happening over here is that Python is looking for this version of Bashir explicitly, capital letter B and then lowercase Ashir. So that means if I write Bashir as lowercase Bashir, it's not going to convert it. If I write it as Bas and then capital letter Hir, it is not going to convert it until I write it the same way it appears, Bashir, and then it now turns it to James. But there is something we can do about this. So we can even use two string methods in a single line. So I can say, instead of saying dot replace first, and then I can say something like okay, dot title. All right, so I want you to convert this one into title case. Let's see something like this. Let's try this, and then let's say Bashir, and then we can see James. So what have I done here? I have said immediately the user passes input as the value, convert it into a title case first. So that means if the user writes Bashir to input it, so once the user presses enter, it converts this Bashir, it converts it into a what? A title case. So it becomes Bashir, and then it hits the replace method. The replace method says uppercase B and then Ashir, and then it then converts it into what? Into James. So that is what the replace function does. So we have another one that we call split. So let me give an example. So let me say something like first name equals to, let's ask user for the first name, let's say input, and then let's say enter first name, right? And then this last name too. So we can say something like input, and then we can say enter last name. All right. But we know that most times, let's say print, we can say first name, right? And then last name. We know that most times, of course, every time, your first name and your last name are always separated by what? By a space. So enter first name, Adeola, and then let's say Ajadi, for example. Now you can now see Adeola Ajadi, wherein Adeola is the first name, the last name is what? Ajadi. I can also use our F string to do something like this, and then I can say something like okay, I can do something like this, and then I can say first name. I can do something like this, first name, and then to signify that okay, this one here is the first name, and then I can say last name, and then is the what? Is last name. So let me do this and then run this. So let's say Adewale Adio, and then we see first name is Adewale, last name is what? Adio. So we know that, well, in most cases the first name and the last name are really always separated by what? By a space. then why am I disturbing myself to ask for the first name and last name? I can just easily use another method called the split. And then how do I do that? So I can come over here and just ask for the name on the line. I can say name equals to, I will just say input. So let's say enter name, and then let's say here, so we can say enter name separated by what? By space, and then I can do dot split. So here I'm saying dot split. So let's see what this is going to give us. So let me say, so let's do this, and then let me print name. So let me print the name so you see what's going to happen. So now let's run this code. Enter name separated by space. Let me say Adewale Ajadi. Enter. Oh, okay, now this is a problem. So it tells us empty separator. Okay, so let me see. Okay, all right, fine. So yeah, I was supposed to add the space over there. Let's see. So Adewale Ajadi, enter. So you can now see that because Python recognizes a space in this our split, and then it says Adewale and Ajadi. So for every space it encounters, it splits them into what? Into sections. So Adewale is the first item, and then Ajadi is the what? Is the second item. So Adewale is first, Ajadi is second. So imagine I want to input three names. I can say Adeola, Adio, Rashid, for example. And then you see Adeola 1, Adio 2, Rashid 3. But imagine if I did not, let me do something like this. Let me do Lucas, and then let me say /Bashir. You can see Lucas /Bashir remain an item. But if I say Lucas /Bashir space Adewale, and then let me do Adio, and then let me do space Ola. Now you can see Lucas Bashir is one item, because once it hits this space, it groups Lucas Bashir into one item. It hits space, it gives me Adewale Adio. Between Adio and Ola, there's what? An empty space, and then it does what? It also separates them. Now let me also give you another good example that you are going to see before we go on. Let me do something like DOB, and then I can say input, and then let me say enter DOB separated by, let's say this / over here, and then let's now also split. So this one here, so let us also split by what? /. So this separator here, delimiter here, is like, okay, what do we want to use to separate the values that we are providing? So let me do this, and then I can say, oh, date of birth, okay, let's say 1990, right? And then let's say 2, and then also 2. So, oh, I didn't print over here, so let's print the DOB. All right, which stands for the date of birth. So let's run this again. Okay, so let's say 1990, and then let's say 55, enter. So now 1990 is an item. It's separated from 5 and then the other 5 as well. But how can we make use of this? Now that we know that when we use split, it's going to separate these values that we provide by the separator that we give. So we can just do something like this. Imagine I say name equals to, so I know I'm expecting 2 values, right? So let me say something like name. Okay, let me just do this so you understand. Input, and then let me say enter name separated by space, right? And then I do this dot split, and then I say, you know what, I'm doing this by space, and now I want to print the name. So let me quickly run this for you so you better understand what you are doing over here. So let's say Adewale, right? Ajani. So by the time I input this, you see Adewale is one item, When it sees a space, it gives us Ajani. Now that I know I am waiting, I want two items, I can be like, okay, why can't first name, the first variable, now Python allows us to do those, last name, the second variable. And now I can now print, I can now also say, let me use my F string here. Let me now say first name, right, is this user's first name, that is that variable over here. And then, so let me say, so the last name, and then let me also say the last name. The last name should be what? The last name. So what have I done over here? So that means, because I've provided two variables, now Python will check, or if I provide Adewale Ajani, Adewale will now go into first name, and Ajani will now go into what? Into last name. So let me run this. Okay, let me now say, let me just use any other name. Let's say Adeola. Okay, sorry. I will explain why that happened. So let's say Adeola Waliyu. Now you see, first name is Adeola, last name is Waliyu. I ran into an error the other time, which I will explain why. So imagine that I now write something like this: Bashir Lucas Adio, for example. Now look at that. Now if I now press enter, it tells me what? Value error. Too many values to unpack. Expected 2 got how many? Got 3. And I'm going to be explaining what this kind of errors, value errors, type error, name error, what they mean later. So now the thing there is, now I wrote Bashir Lucas Adio, and on line 1 here, I said two variables. So if Bashir goes inside first name, Lucas goes into last name, what of Adio? Where does it go? So that is why it tells us too many values to do what? To unpack. If I now also give just ordinary Lucas, now we have another error. It says not enough values to what? To unpack. Expected 2 got 1. Because why? If just Lucas goes into first name, what value would last name have? Nothing. So how to prevent this kind of errors? We are going to be taking a look at them in subsequent classes. Now, why don't we now transition from this world into the world of int? So before, we have worked a lot, but we have worked with strings. I'm now going to explain the difference between a string and an integer. Now, before, I said age, let's say equals to 20, right? And then I'll print age. All right. Let me save this. All right. So let's do this here. And then age is 20. That works. But why is it that I have always kept everything inside the double quote? I also said something like name is Lucas. So why am I putting everything inside double quotes? What if I remove this double quote from name? So let's say name equals to Lucas. What if I don't put a double quote inside Lucas? So let me print name. So you can even see it's even underlining that. So let me run this. Now it tells me there's an error. Name error. Name Lucas is not what? It's not defined. So that is telling me that Lucas is not defined, because once Python sees a string like this, it just assumes it to be a variable. So it is wondering, where is this Lucas variable from? It is not defined. We didn't define it. But if I turn this now into a double quote, save it, and then let me run this, you now see Lucas. But how about numbers? Okay, what if I say age equals to double quote 20, and then I print age. Let's save this. All right, this worked as expected. But now let me now remove double quote from it. Now when I remove double quote from Lucas, Lucas, it didn't work. But now it's still giving me 20. So now 2 and 0, with or without double quote, it worked. But are they the same? And that is where we are going to be learning about data types. So we have different kinds of data types. So in Python, we have the string, we have the integer, we have the float, and these are very important. And then we also have Boolean as well. So, but why is it that 20 with or without a string works? Now, what is the difference? Now, let me show you. Now, let me say 20 plus 20. This is 20 without double quotes. Let me do this. Now, this gave me 40. But let me wrap this 20 and this 20. Let me wrap them inside what? Inside double quotes, and then let me run this now. So this is now giving me 2020, 2020. Now that is where it now becomes interesting. Now any text character, any number, whether it's A to Z, A, B, C, D, whether it's 1, 2, 3, underscore, star, plus, as long as they are inside double quotes, they are what? They are called strings. strings. So this is the equivalence of saying AB plus what? Plus CD is still going to give me what? ABCD. So this process here is called concatenation. So when you add two strings together using the plus sign. Now you can see concatenation is in green, and I added an hash before it. So this one here is called comment. So if you want to add something that is readable, that may guide your thoughts, but you don't want the program to see it like a code, then as a code, then you can add hash and then you start writing what you want to write. So that is known as what? A comment. So I added concatenation as what? As a comment. So we have concatenated A, B, and what? CD. I can also say 50 plus what? Plus C and D. If I run this, it is giving me 50 what? 50 CD. That is what? Concatenation. So that means if you want to do anything mathematical, it is very important that you don't use double quote for your what? For your numbers. So now I can now say 50 plus what? I can say 50 plus what? Plus 20. If I run this now, so this is going to give me what? 70. Now, the reason why you must understand the different kind of data types is so that you can understand their behaviors. So if I do, let me say something like, let me say A, right, as a double, with double quotes, multiplied. So the star sign is used for multiplication in Python. Multiply by 5. Let's see what's going to happen. So if I do that, it is going to give me A. It is going to repeat the number of times that I've multiplied what? That I've multiplied it by. But if I do A multiplied by 5, which is a string, this is going to throw an error. If I also say that 2, a number multiplied by 5, 2, which is wrapped in double quotes, a string now, multiplied by 5 in no double quote, which is an integer, it also gives me 2 in 5 places. But if I do 2, an integer, multiplied by 2, multiplied by 5, which is an integer, if I run this, it is giving me what? It is giving me 10. So now that's something you should know about the behaviors of integers and string. But then we can also convert a string into an integer and vice versa. Remember that we have seen a string, and we have seen the difference between a string, right, and an integer. And then we have also seen two functions, which is print and then impute. We can also introduce several other functions. Another function we are going to introduce now is it is the int function. So the int function allows you to convert a string into an integer. And how do you do that? If I say int, so let me just do something like score, and then let me say equals to the int, and then let me turn this one, let me say this is 5 plus the int again, and then let me also say this one should be 10, and then let me print what? Let me print score. So the int is a function that takes a string at its argument, what you pass inside the parentheses, and then it is going to convert that string into what? Into an integer. So if I run this now, look at that, it is giving me 10 plus 15. But without the int, it is going to give me 510. It is going to do what? To concatenate it. So we can also do the same thing. We can also convert an integer into a string. So if I do this, and then I do this, and then I can turn this one to what? str, and then I can turn this one to what? str. So instead of 5 plus 10 give me 15, now it is now going to give me what? 510. So that means I have used the str function to convert my strings into my integers into strings, and also use the int function to convert my strings into what? Into integers. And now there's a whole lot we can do with numbers. So I can say, so score 1, and then, so now let me quickly show you something very interesting. If I say enter score, and then I say input, and then I say something like, let's say enter score, right? And then I now say something like, let's say print, and then let me say the score, and then let me say multiply by 3. Let's do that. So if I run this, now score, let's say, should be 5. Now this gave you 555 instead of giving me 15. Why? That is because anytime you use the score, anytime you use the input function, anything you pass as the value, it is going to give you what? It is going to give you a string. So when I entered 5, so the value of score became 5 as a string, not this what? Not this 5. So anytime you are using the input function, you must make sure, if you want to make mathematical calculations, you must convert that value into what? Into an integer. All right, so let me do this. Enter. Let me now say 5. You can now say 15. Alternatively, you can also do it like this, so that you do this first and then you wrap this one as well. So now the first thing this is going to do is that this inner parenthesis, Python is going to respect this first, and then this, and then pass it to this. So it is going to take the score, which is 5, right, with the double quotes, and then it will now call this int function on it, turn it into an integer, and make it the value of score. And then that 5 will now multiply by 3, and then it's now going to give us what? It's now going to give us, let me run it, it's giving us what? 15 as well. 5 times 3. So there's a lot we can do. We can also have subtraction. So we can say something like, we can just even print. Let's say something like 10 minus 5. Let's say 10 minus 5. All right. So this one is going to give us what? It's going to give us 5. So we can do something like score 1 equals to, let's just ask for the score, and then let's say score, let's say, okay, let's do this, score, right? And then let's do this. So we can say the total equals to 100 minus the int of what? Of score 1. All right, and then we just want to print what? We want to print the total. So now you can address a programming problem in different ways. What's the score? The score is 40, and then we have the total score is now what? It's now 60. And then we can also use our f string and say something like your total score, or let's say your final score, for example, is that we can just do just much about anything, and then we can just say should be the what? Should be that total. We do this now, run this now, and then this tells us, okay, let's say 70, and then let's say your final score is 30, whatever we just want to be the value. So we can also do a lot. So we have division. I can also print, let's say I can say 10. So this forward slash is what we use for what? For division. If I run this, so this gives us what? This gives us 2. And then division is now returning a float. What is a float? So a float data type is the value that has a decimal value, like a decimal point, like 2.0, 2.2.2, I'll be 222.5 or 2.2 or whatever it is. So float data types have what? They have decimal values. All right. So now another thing I want to show you is this percent sign. Now this percent sign is not going to give you like the 5% of 10. It's not going to give you that. So we call this one the modulo sign. So we call this one, we call it the modulo sign. So the modulo sign gives you the what? The remainder of a division. So while 10 divided by 5 gives you what? 2.0, right? So 10 modulo 2 gives you what? 0. Because by the time you divide 10 by 5, you are getting nothing. So let's do 10 modulo, let's say 3. 10 modulo 3 gives you what? 1. Because 10 divided by 3 now gives you, when you divide 3 by 10, so that is 3 times. That is 9. It remains 1. So modulo gives you the remainder of a division, but division itself, of course, gives you here. This is giving us 3.333. So we have another one which is round. So round helps you to round up the value of an item. So imagine I call round of this. Let's say the round of 10. So round is a function as well. So let's do this. So instead of 3.33, it just gives you what? It just gives you 3. It rounds it to the nearest what? To the nearest integer. All right. So I think that's going to be it for this first lecture on functions and variables. So in the next video, I'll be talking more about functions. I'll see you in the next video.